Welcome to a special edition of Talking Politics. Today we'll not be doing just for the average political pundit. This is for people across the state and in Walker County and elsewhere in the surrounding area, because this is we're entitling this as "How Do We Vote in Alabama?" This is for the average fellow that is like me, that after every other year you forget maybe some of the details, and maybe you don't even know about some details that are advantageous to you in terms of getting assistance or whatever in terms of getting to vote. So by chance, we just happened to have my old friend John Merrill, who I knew in college years ago, and he's the Secretary of State for Alabama and is in charge of state voting in Alabama, and so he's here today to help us to know more about the basics of the voting. And John, we just thank you for showing up today.
Ed, I'm delighted to be here, and you're talking about our friendship going back so many decades. That's when we were young men, my friend.
We were young. I had hair. I had less weight. Yes, and you haven't changed a bit.
Oh, you're very kind, brother.
That scares me.
You're kind.
But he really hasn't changed. We do want to point out that we have, of course, the primary on Tuesday. The hours will be the hours statewide, in fact, are 7 to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. as far as the polls. There is a primary on March 3rd. We have a runoff at the last Tuesday of March, and then we have the general election on November the 2nd. I mention that because some will remember the municipal elections. The state does not handle those, and we will not be talking about those today, but I do want to point out the Alabama League of Municipalities has a wonderful website that you'll want to go to if you're involved with that, and we will be talking more about that later, of course. But there's a lot of election information on the Alabama League of Municipalities website, so please go there and see that. But today, let's talk about the primary, and also I should point out, as far as online, there is a website, ALABAMAVOTES.GOV. A lot of what we'll be talking about is on there. There's also an election guide for this year. Go to ALABAMAVOTES.GOV, and if you go to some election year information first, and then go to the year, then you'll find a lot of information about that you'll need. But we're going to be reviewing some of that today.
And Ed, also your viewers can keep up with the real-time results of the election in all 67 counties by going to ALABAMAVOTES.GOV and accessing the election night reporting system, which we introduced back in 2016. So we're excited to continue that and to make sure that our people are fully educated about the results of the election in all 67 counties.
And there's now an app for the state of Alabama to be able to look for election.
There is at Vote for Alabama, and you can certainly use that mobile application to register to vote for the very first time or to modify your voter registration record. Now, it's too late to do that for Tuesday, March 3rd, but not for the March 31st runoff. Mm-hmm. So as long as you have a valid Alabama driver's license, you can use that application. And if you've moved from Parrish to Jasper, if you move from Carbon Hill to Dora, then you can change your registration record without ever coming to the courthouse.
And the name for the app is
Vote for Alabama.
Vote for Alabama.
Yes, sir.
And you can do some of those things also for free, also on the website.
Absolutely.
On Alabama Vote, which connects to his Secretary of State's website.
That's
right. That's why, but it's simpler to say ALABAMAVOTES.gov. Now, first question. We have a primary.
Yes, sir.
I'm a voter. I want to vote in the primary, and they want to ask me for my party.
Right.
I want to vote for my Democratic presidential candidate. I want to vote for my local Republican candidate. But why are they asking me for my party?
Well, the one thing that we have to remember is that our elections that will be taking place on March the 3rd are simply party preference primaries designed by the parties to determine who their nominees are and enabling the voter to indicate which party that they support for this particular election cycle. So just because you vote in the Democratic primary in 2020 does not mean that you're a Democrat for life. It just simply means that for March 3rd and March 31st, you have to maintain the Democratic ballot whenever you vote, since we don't have crossovers. Now, some people say, well, I'd prefer to vote for the U.S. Senate Republican candidates and the presidential candidates for the Democratic Party. But what you're enabling the voter to do at that point, if you gave them that right, would be to select the person that they hope to elect and the person they hope to defeat in the general election. So by doing that, our parties have said you can only vote for the people in our party in this election cycle, and then in 2022, they can change their party preference if they choose.
You can, but you have to vote if you're in the primary. You have to keep the same party in the runoff.
Yes, sir. But if you did not vote in the primary and you choose to vote in the runoff, again, you can vote for either party.
Right. Now, the registration, as you say, it's too late to vote in for the primary.
That's correct.
But you can register for the other election dates.
That's right, up until the 17th of March. And
it's a 2-week window now, isn't it?
Yes.
It used to be 10 days, but now it's 2
That's
weeks.
right, 2 weeks. That was the last bill I passed as a member of the Alabama legislature in 2014. And what that enables the voter to do is to register right up until 11:59 p.m. if they choose to use the mobile application. If they walk in, they have to do it by the close of business on that day.
Right. And I think I've seen, I think I saw March 16th and October 19th. Those would be the regular,
That's correct.
The regular dates
Yes, sir.
For registration. Now, and in terms of registration, now let's just say it's too late this time. But what if you moved and you haven't changed your registration? Where you moved?
Well, if you haven't changed your registration information, for example, the communities that I talked about, I could have easily talked about Summerton too. But one of the things that we want to make sure that you know is once the deadline passes, you can't change your registration information for that election cycle. You have to wait until the next election cycle. So you should vote in the place where you were supposed to vote based on your residence. And that is paramount to participating in the process and doing it legally and effectively. It may result in you having to cast a provisional ballot, but if you do, then as long as you go to the Board of Registrar's office by the following Friday, you will be able to have your vote counted as if you cast a regular ballot on election day.
And so now let's explain.
Okay.
Provisional ballot.
That's right.
What are you talking about when you say a provisional ballot?
So if you went to vote, let's say that you lived in Oakman, but you'd recently moved to Jasper. When you go to the polling site in Jasper that you believe that you're supposed to be voting at the Jasper Civic Center, for example, and they say, well, Mr. Howell, you're not on our voter list. And you say, well, I live at 123 Main Street here in Jasper. And they'll say, well, we know you're a registered voter, but you're not registered to vote here. So they will give you a ballot. You will vote for the candidates of your choice in the party of your choice. And then by Friday, they will give you instructions at the polling site. And then by Friday of that week, you will take your identifying information to the Board of Registrar's office, showing them that you do live at 123 Main Street. And then at that point, your record will be updated and you will be able to vote at your location.
Yeah.
Now, if you're an inactive voter, then you can fill out a voter update form at the polling site and you will vote a regular ballot on election day. But if you are out of position because you've moved, you've relocated, you would have to vote a provisional ballot.
Right. And so there, just about any hiccup that goes on with voting, you can vote a provisional.
Yes, sir.
And and here's another thing: it's counted a week later with was absentees in it.
Well, the absentees will be
absentees are counted that night.
That's right. They're counted on election day.
But provisional, is it just provisionals?
That's right. And the UOCAVA votes that are returned from military overseas voters. Yes,
the
sir.
military voters and the provisionals, and they're counted 1 week later.
That's correct. The following Tuesday.
Right.
Yes,
so when you hear election results on that night, it's always unofficial election
That's
results.
correct, and that's why we always say these results are unofficial. And then the certification of the election process will take place just a few days after those other votes are counted.
There's always one box or so that's not counted, and that's the provisional situation. Absentee ballots. Oh, I love absentee ballots. Absentee ballots. Tell me about the process that we're undergoing, and I know that there is also a drawing in the booklet that you hand out these days, and we'll try to see if we can get that on the screen if we can. But there is different envelopes involved too. So let's say, and there's different absentee ballot processes.
Yes, they are.
So go away.
Well,
go.
The absentee process is designed to help the voter that is going to be away from their ballot box on election day. if they're going to be out of town, if they're away at college, if they're sick in the hospital, if they're working out of state or out of the country, then they can indicate that they, and in some instances, if they're incarcerated but they have not lost their right to vote, then those individuals will be able to vote an absentee ballot after successful application to receive the ballot, and then their vote will be counted the same way that the regular voter would be at the polling site. It's important to note that certain steps have to be followed and adhered to in order to make sure that you are qualified and that your qualification enables you to make a successful application for your vote to be counted.
Right. But there are different processes for business and for medical.
That is correct. And those are outlined on our website at ALABAMAVOTES.GOV.
Right.
Now, if the voter has a question, and the deadline for a successful application for an absentee ballot ended yesterday at the close of business.
For regular absentee.
For regular absentees. But we had a law that we changed last year to make sure that when you submit your application, you have to submit your photo ID, which is basically the same way you do when you vote in person. Because when you vote in person, you don't give them your ID when you're turning your ballot in. You give them your ID when you're checking in at the station. That makes it the same. And it also reduces the possibility for voter fraud, because we will be able to check your signature against the one that's on file with the voter registration office and the one that's on file with the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency for your driver's license.
Right. And anything that you turn in, by the way, by mail, you just make a photocopy. You don't send the card, you send,
That's correct.
Send a photocopy.
That's correct. Do not send your driver's license with your application.
Right, right. Please don't. But some people might get confused. But what about when do you turn in your absentee ballot, and who can turn it in for you?
Nobody. Only you can turn it in if you're doing it in person. That's the voter.
Right.
Or if you mail it, you can use the United States mail, regular delivery, or you can use an advanced version of the United States mail through express mail or something like that, FedEx, UPS, DSL, any of those nationally recognized carriers.
Right. But now people.
We just changed that law last year.
It's a new law.
Yes, sir.
Now the envelopes apparently confuse a lot of people. That's why I mentioned about the drawing. But there are different sizes.
Aside you say that, let me say this. It's important to know this. I had one of the smartest people that I know, that's an attorney in Northeast Alabama, call me yesterday and was concerned because his absentee ballot was sent back to him as a provisional ballot because he did not submit his ID when he submitted the application.
Right.
He told me where he got the absentee ballot application, which was online at ALABAMAVOTES.GOV, and that it did not say anywhere that he needed to submit his identification. So I said, "Counselor, are you looking at the screen?" And he said, "I am. I see the application here now." I said, "What does the first line say?" He said, "It says absentee ballot application." I said, "What does the second line say?" He read that to me, and I said, "What does the third line say?" He said, "In bold letters it says, please return your identification copy when you return your application." He said, "I guess it is there." And I said, "Yes, sir." It's important to note the instructions are there, they just need to be followed.
Funny how journalists have trouble reading instructions too sometimes. So
we all do.
We all do. But in terms of this, there are 4 different things that we need to get. There's the ballot, which is simple enough, but there's 3 envelopes. There's a security envelope.
Yeah, the security envelope is where your ballot will be placed when you complete it. You fold your ballot, you put it in the security envelope, you seal the security envelope.
Which looks like a regular size envelope.
It's a little larger.
Well, just a little
larger, about the size that you would put a photograph in.
Right.
And then you put it in the application return envelope, and then that's the one that you have to get the witness to sign for. Then you return that.
They're called also the affidavit.
That's correct.
Which has lines on it too.
That is
correct. On the envelope.
That is correct.
Okay.
And then when you send that in, then you know at that point that it has not been tampered with. It is the vote that was determined to be cast by the voter. And then you know when they open that envelope on election day, they'll free it from the envelope, put it in the machine, and it will count just like it would have if you had voted on election day.
And the affidavit and all that is put in the regular oversized envelope.
That's correct.
Which you put your stamp on and all that.
That's
okay.
correct. Or you need to put 2 stamps.
2 stamps.
That's
right.
correct.
Yes. By the way, when they go through the process of at the courthouse and you do the absentee ballots, I think some people have been concerned about how people would look at those. There's a process where so many people handle it and move it along.
That is correct.
They don't see it.
They're not examined.
They're not examined.
And that's the key. People want to make sure that their vote is secret and that it is private, and it is because of the system and the way the system's designed.
Right. So we've mentioned provisionals. How are the elderly helped? There's certain ways to help and assist people.
There are,
at the
and if you're
polls.
over 65 years of age and you have an infirmity, you don't even have to provide your ID in order to receive a ballot through the application process if you're voting absentee. We want to make sure that people know that as well, because sometimes that's a more convenient way for that individual to be able to vote. And in person, if you are older and you go to vote and we have a long line, then the law allows you to go to the front of the line.
So you can, if you're a certain age, then you
That
can
is
go.
correct.
How old do you have to be to?
You would qualify yet.
You'd qualify. Oh, yes.
I'm just playing.
Well,
Really, 65 years of age
no.
is what. So you don't qualify yet.
No.
You just feel like you do.
I feel like I do, but
Yes,
I feel like 85, but that's fine. We didn't talk about the photo voter ID,
Yes.
and that will be needed. That's sometimes forgotten. And when we say that, of course, you've talked about how you can go easily get one at the
Sure.
courthouse.
You can get one on election day yet.
Can you get? That was one thing. Can you get one late? You've already registered. Have to be registered to
Absolutely.
vote, but you can go get one before the vote.
Sure, you could get it on election day and take it and use it. Now, you won't have the regular card. The hard plastic card will
be
not have
temporary.
had time to be mailed to you, but they will give you a temporary voter ID card, which you can use at your polling site the day of the election.
But there are so many, besides your driver's license, we all know the driver's license can be used. We know that the state issued voter special
Which we
card.
provide in our office and the Board of Registrar's office does as well.
But there's many others, aren't there? Like
Oh, yes.
military, federal ID cards.
That's correct. You know, if you work at Bevel and you want to use your student ID, it qualifies. If you are a senior at Jasper High School, you want to use your ID card, you can use it. It's a government issued ID. And the thing to remember is we're just trying to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. A military ID also qualifies. There's 10 different forms of identification that actually qualify to use when you go to vote. And if you don't have any of those and you go to the polling site, 2 polling officials, 2 election officials that can positively identify you and will sign the affidavit indicating that they know who Ed Howell is. At that point, you're qualified and you can cast your ballot unencumbered without an ID.
I see. Okay. But there are so many different ways.
Sure there are.
on
And Ed,
that.
I think it's important for your listeners and viewers to know that since this law has been into effect, we have not had a single incident of occurrence where anyone has been denied access to the vote at the polling site because they did not have the proper credential when they went to cast their ballot for the candidate of their choice.
Right. Now let's talk about presidential candidates, because again, if you get your ballot, you will at the top be able to vote for your candidate.
That's correct.
And Trump has one candidate against him, so there is actually a contested election on the Republican side, as well as that long list of Democratic candidates.
Sure, Governor William Weld, a former governor from Massachusetts, is running against the president.
Right. So you have contested elections on both sides, but then you got delegates.
That's right.
Now, that's going to confuse people. Why we got the delegates?
So before this election cycle, what had always happened in Alabama is the list of delegates, which is enormous this time because the president's running for re-election. So a lot of people wanted to be considered to be delegates for the president, have their names listed underneath the president's name before you ever got to Congressman Adderholt, before you ever got to the Republican nominees for the United States Senate or any other state or local office. And so a lot of people would suffer from voter fatigue before they got to those other races. So we changed the law in 2016 to make sure that in 2020 and beyond, that the delegates' names would be the last names printed on the ballot. That enables the voter that's suffering from voter fatigue to make sure that they hit those races that are elected positions that are so important to our governance before they ever got to those delegates, which are simply party positions. But you must vote for the delegates that you chose the presidential candidate's name. For example, in Alabama this time, it's not a concern if you're voting a Republican ballot because Governor Weld did not have any delegates that were running for him. But if you're voting a Democratic ballot and you select Amy Klobuchar, she did not have any delegates that were running under her. If you selected Senator Sanders, he has a number of delegates that were running under him, just like Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. So you have to know this. If you selected Amy Klobuchar as your presidential nominee, you cannot vote for Senator Sanders' delegates. You could only vote for Senator Klobuchar's delegates, and she didn't have any.
What happens if you do cross?
Then those votes will not count.
For the primary?
For the delegates.
For the delegates.
Your vote for the
primary,
candidate.
For the delegates.
Yeah, your vote for the candidate will still be registered for that individual.
Yeah, I meant for the delegates.
But your delegate votes will not count.
But the votes on the top end for the president would count.
That is correct.
Okay.
As long as you only voted for one.
Right. Now you have...
This is not Chicago.
Now you have a amendment on the ballot, Amendment 1. You might give a little short explanation about that. And
Sure. The bottom line is this, Ed. Amendment 1 gives the voter the option to choose whether or not they want to continue to have an elected school board or an appointed school board that would be selected by the governor and confirmed by the Senate.
Right. And so that would go in effect shortly after that amendment.
That is correct.
Would be voted on.
And it has to be voted on in this particular election, and then you would know whether or not it passed.
And I think Ms. McRae, who lives in Hamilton, would, and by the way, this is localized in this area, for this district would then take effect as a school board member if the amendment fails, because she's running under the old system.
That is correct.
Okay. And then if the amendment does succeed, then it'd be a whole new system, and the governor
would choose the people that she would like to serve in that role, and with appropriate and proper confirmation by the Alabama State Senate, those people would begin their terms of service.
Right. Some smaller things that are in the system, and there's a lot of questions in the handbook. And I should say there's an Alabama. We didn't say this really, but there's an Alabama voter handbook.
Yes, sir.
It's done every cycle.
And it's also available online at ALABAMAVOTES.GOV if your viewers would like to review it and to see the subject matter that's contained there.
Right. And the booklet, I think, sometimes is available at your local board of registrars.
It is, and I actually have a limited supply in my vehicle here.
And I meant to ask you, your magical trunk that has so many things like that, I'm going to ask for one when you get it.
Yes, sir.
But it is available online. I look at it all the time. So, but some of the questions include sample ballots at the polls. Can you take a sample ballot and use it to help you at the polls?
You certainly can. You can already have it completed. You will know who the people are that you're selecting for those offices, and you can actually sit down and mark your ballot in person using that as your guide if you choose to.
Now, you can't leave it at the polls.
That would be a mistake. That's right.
Because especially if you have it marked up, that could lead to all sorts of confusion. So.
And also people may think that you're into electioneering at the polling site, which is a criminal offense.
Which is exactly what I was going to ask next. No campaigning at the polls.
That is correct.
Not so many feet?
30 feet before you enter the election center, wherever that center is for you when you go to cast your vote in any one of the 2,499 polling sites in Alabama.
But not within that distance.
That is correct.
And can you wear shirts or buttons? Or
you can, as long as you're not loitering.
Right. So if you're not sort of just lingering around to
That's correct.
to look like you're campaigning anyway, you
That's
can get in
correct.
and get out, and so
Yes, sir.
you got. I think like a 4 minutes before they to vote before they ask you.
Well, it depends.
If you need assistance,
because how many items are on the ballot, and
Well,
certain
yeah.
ballots that you select would have a larger number of offices to consider than
Right.
others. It also depends on where you live in the state. We have congressional races in Congressional District 1 and Congressional District 2. We don't have a nomination process in the 4th Congressional District, in the 6th Congressional District, in the 3rd Congressional District. So it's important that you give the voter time to complete their ballot successfully.
yeah, the 4th has Adderholt's district, and he's not got opposition this year. Just to make that clear. But yeah, I think it goes back to the loitering thing. If you lingered for so long,
Right.
you can't just stay there all day and
That's right.
pretend to. So, but you got to get in and out
That's right.
eventually.
We're not putting the clock on you. It's not like a pitch count at a ball game.
No,
but it is
no.
important to note.
Okay, I made a mistake on my ballot. What do I do?
Well, you can talk to the inspector, and the inspector can spoil your ballot, and they can give you another ballot.
What is spoiling?
That means that ballot will not be counted. It will be set aside in a different place. It has to be counted so that we know that it's inventoried, but the votes will not be counted if you're given another ballot, because that ballot that you're talking about will not be fed into the machine.
Right.
So if your ballot has a mistake on it, perhaps you marked that you wanted to vote for Mayor Bloomberg and you wanted to vote for Vice President Biden, and you did that and you could not get it to erase the one that you did not actually want to cast your vote for, then at that point they could spoil your ballot, and then you would be able to have another ballot given to you and use that ballot as your ballot of choice.
How do I mark my ballot? I got a pen here. Do I use my pen, your pen,
Yeah, and
pencil?
those instructions will be given at the polling site, and at that point, if you don't have an instrument to mark your ballot, they'll provide one for you at no cost.
Right. Well, you got to mark it within that circle. Does it? What if it
That
gets
is correct.
What if it gets outside the
If
circle?
it gets outside the circle to the point where it distorts the reader and the reader cannot evaluate for whom you were attempting to vote, then your ballot will be kicked out, and it will be determined whether or not you need to spoil your ballot or whether or not your ballot can be cast with that exception.
Walker County, I don't think that we may have a few of the electronic polling devices. Do you? But some of the counties, I know Marion County has some. We may have some in Walker County.
And 30 plus counties in the state actually have the electronic poll books, and our goal is to ensure that all sites in Alabama have those by 2022. Now, we just received a grant from the federal government, and we hope that we will actually have all of those polling sites with electronic poll books by November 3rd, 2020 for this year's general election.
That's a very new grant, because I haven't heard about
Yes,
this.
sir.
So, how much did they get?
$8.1 million total.
Wow.
$6.9 million came from the federal government, and our match would make it 8.1.
Now, to be clear about this, when we all go to the polls and we ask, we have to sign in.
Sure.
It's what's my line time. We sign in
That's
with our
right.
signature on our open. But now, these electronic poll books would allow you to take a card and insert it.
That's correct, because on the back of your driver's license, you can see that there's a scan strip
Yeah.
that will enable the reader to be able to determine who you are and match your signature and your photograph with the one that's on file with the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency. Now, other readers actually have the scan here where the code is, and it does the same thing. This is instantaneous, and we know that you're who you say you are. This is the identifiable card. Now, if you don't have a driver's license, because this is the only instrument that can be used in that regard, then a simple set of keystrokes will help us get to you. For example, if you didn't have your ID, but you had another ID, you had one that qualified, for example, one from Jasper High School, then at that point, they would type in HOW, and each time a letter is typed in for your last name, the number of potential characters that qualify reduces itself.
Right.
And finally it gets to the point where it says Ed Howell, and then beside there it says Roll Tide. So then we know that you're who you say you are, and then you'll be able to cast your ballot at that point. Instead of it being instantaneous, it will usually take about 8 to 10 seconds.
By the way,
which is still a lot less time than it was when you were flipping pages. You were finding the name in that 8 inches thick of pages for the old poll book that was highlighted with a yellow highlighter, and then you signed in with a wet signature on the check-in sheet.
And it reduces errors, I'm sure.
Yes, and it reduces the wait time 60 to 75%.
Wow. These are really, to be clear, these are like iPads that we use.
That is correct.
In these things. So they're not things that we're not spooky that we, these
that
are
is
iPads
correct.
that
and they're not connected to the internet. Your viewers need to know that, because there's no way that someone can break in that system and change the poll list or corrupt the process by doing that. They are connected through a Bluetooth technology, and when that happens, you're locked out of all the other equipment, so you can't go to another location and vote.
We might as well ask that, because again, the allegations about Russia interfering. None of the machines that we have from
ES&S, our election system and software provider.
Nothing that we have as far as what the voter uses is connected to the internet.
That is correct.
So their vote, and they use paper ballots.
That is correct, which are retained for 2 years after the election.
So there is nothing there that could the Russians or anybody else hacking in would be able to change our vote.
That is correct. And so we don't have to be concerned or worry about whether or not our elections are safe, secure, or have integrity and credibility.
Which other states have some of those concerns.
That is correct.
But we don't. So I didn't ask too about there are still machines that are used for the the disabled, but we still call them handicap machines sometimes.
That's right.
For the blind, for the...
That is correct. So the voter is actually in a position to vote independently without assistance. And that is something that we want to encourage all voters that qualify to be able to use. And actually, even a voter that is not challenged, a regular voter with normal facilities that is able to cast a regular ballot at a regular machine is also able to use that piece of equipment if they so desire.
Okay. Okay.
And they are available at each one of the 2,499 polling sites.
I forgot about this a while ago. Cell phone use. Can you bring your cell phone, and can you take a photo of your ballot?
And you can take a ballot selfie. We passed that law last year because we have people that would like to show that they're casting their ballot for the candidate of their choice. You can do that today. However, you do not need to feature any other person in your photo whenever you take the picture.
That's privacy issues.
That is correct.
Okay. What else would you like to get across in terms of some things that may not
Well, Ed, look, one of the main things is we want to make sure that your viewers know that we've worked extraordinarily hard to ensure that each and every eligible U.S. citizen, that's a resident of Alabama, has been given the opportunity to become a registered voter and cast a ballot for the candidate of their choice. Since January the 19th, 2015, which is 5 years, 1 month, and 9 days ago, we have registered 1,465,437 new voters. We now have a state record 3,576,539 registered voters in Alabama. Those numbers are unprecedented and unparalleled in the history of the state of Alabama. We have removed more than 860,000 people from the voter rolls, because those people have moved away, they passed away, or they've been put away. And we want to make sure that people know our singular goal and mission is to ensure that it's easy to vote and hard to cheat. 96% of all eligible African Americans in Alabama are registered to vote. 91% of all eligible white Alabamians are registered to vote, and 94% of all eligible Alabamians are registered to vote. We've had 6 convictions on voter fraud, 2 elections overturned, and 1 elected official that's been removed from office because of the violation of the trust and confidence of the process. We're very excited about that.
The next video we're going to do is how you memorize figures, because nobody in politics knows how you are able to do that, but you are amazing at those figures. Again, we have the The sites, again, it's Alabama Votes.
ALABAMAVOTES.GOV.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And also the app.
Vote for Alabama, available at the App Store, because there is an app for that.
There is.
And let me tell you this too, Ed, it's important for you to know and for your viewers to know, they can actually use the mobile app to determine where they're supposed to go vote. They can actually see a list of the offices that are going to be on their ballot. So that tool is more than just a tool to register or to relocate when you change your personal location if you're trying to establish a new residency for voting purposes. So we want people to be able to use that system. More than 1 million voters have.
Well, John, I want to thank you. I know that your time is short, and we appreciate you doing this today. And we thank you for all you're doing.
Ed, thank you, my friend. It's always good to be with you.
Good to be with you. And thank you for joining us today. But of course, it doesn't do any good to talk about this all day long if you don't go out and participate in the process. Again, next Tuesday you have a number of choices. We have a number of choices in Walker County, but I know also in Fayette County, Marion County, all our surrounding areas. And our democracy needs you to participate. I know there's times when we complain, but we really do need for all of us to go out and participate and make this democracy work. So please, from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night, the polls will be open at all precincts across the state of Alabama. And we hope that you'll join us there as well, and we hope you'll join us next time here on Talking Politics.